Eternal Echoes presents The Embrace, a work by Amparo Dávila. Sitting by the window, she amused herself by watching the raindrops slide down the glass. It was a rainy and dark autumn night, one of those nights when the rain falls slowly and continuously, with the monotony of a muffled sob, like that weeping that echoes in the corners of abandoned houses. From her window, she could see the lightning flashing in that gloomy horizon of silhouetted buildings, illuminated only briefly by the light of the bolts. From time to time, she leaned against the window and gazed at the solitary street, the rain falling on the old tiles, forming puddles or streaming away in rivulets. It was almost all she could do on those nights when the city's poor lighting dimmed considerably or was intermittently interrupted due to constant electrical discharges. Sad nights in which she felt the weight of a fully lived past and the present solitude that enveloped her like an immense silence, only broken by the thunder, the howling of the dogs tied up by their owners, or the wind lashing at doors and windows. Tired of looking at the deserted street, she took up her crochet work and sat down to weave her memories as well. She, Marina, had once waited for him night after night, spying his arrival through the curtains, restless to the point of death if he did not come on time. As the minutes passed, she grew more nervous, checking herself in the mirror every 5 minutes, powdering her nose over and over again, putting on perfume, applying hand cream, combing her hair and then combing it again, filing her nails, straightening the seams of her stockings. She tried to read, but no book could hold her interest, and she would toss it aside in frustration. She paced back and forth through the house, checking the clock, peeling away from the window only to rush back to it. How many times had she cried, fearing something had happened to him or that he no longer loved her and would never return? She tormented herself thinking he might be with another woman, and she would sob, ruining her makeup, consumed by pain and despair, until at last she would hear the key turning in the lock. The long creak of the door, like a mournful lament, made her shudder, and the gust of air that reached her felt like a cold breath against her face, a faint icy whisper. Marina adjusted her wool shawl and went to close the door. She sat down again and resumed her knitting. Raquel had taught her how to knit. Raquel. A deep nostalgia overtook her at the thought of her friend, her only friend. They had been inseparable since school. Marina had confided everything in Raquel, despite Raquel's constant disapproval of her way of being and thinking, always trying to change her. It was only natural. Raquel had been raised within a rigid, highly moralistic framework and could not accept or condone anything that deviated from her principles. But despite everything, she had been her greatest confidant. How distant and faded in the past were those afternoons when they had tea in the little sitting room with Louis XV furniture at Raquel's house. They would talk for hours and hours until the evening fell, and Marina would leave in a rush to get ready, to wait for him. "I never thought I could love this much," she always told Raquel, and Raquel would simply nod in silent approval, offering a small smile. How it hurt when Raquel got married and moved to Vienna. Vienna, of all places, so far away. Marina had felt immensely sad and depressed on the day of the wedding, as if foreseeing she would lose her forever. A premonition that, soon enough, came true. She had never liked weddings and had attended only a few, Raquel's, and that other one, the one that decided her fate. She had worn a new dress and hat, a lilac lace dress that everyone said was beautiful, but she did not feel happy. It bothered her. No, it was more than that. It was something deeper, more painful than she could have ever imagined. The fact that he was getting married, the childhood friend she had adored all her life, the one who had always been by her side through every joyful and sorrowful moment, During the ceremony, she had been unable to contain herself and had wept uncontrollably, not caring at all that she was in a grand church full of elegant guests, flowers, and music. She knew it was absurd, above all, ridiculous, to cry at a wedding. But her emotions overpowered all pretense and decorum. She could not bear to see him joining his life forever with such an insignificant, ordinary woman, one so utterly lacking in charm. No, she could not bear it, because in that moment, with absolute certainty, she realized she loved him, that she wanted him only for herself. After the ceremony, she and Raquel went to the sacristy to congratulate the newlyweds. Raquel had not made a single comment up to that moment, but it was undeniable. She had seen right through her. When she embraced him, she could not stop the tears from welling up again. "This is absurd, don't you think?" was all she could manage to say. But in his eyes and in the shared tremor of their embrace, she knew it wasn't absurd, and that life, for both of them, was truly beginning at that instant. She never heard from Raquel again after she moved to Vienna. Not a single letter in all those years. Perhaps her husband, even more rigid and prejudiced than Raquel herself, had forbidden their friendship. Perhaps, who could know? She had lost them both almost at the same time. In just a few months, she was left completely alone. But Marina preferred to remember other things, other moments that had filled her life. Those nights when she now wished she could have died of pleasure in his arms. It would have been beautiful to die like that, hands entwined, lips joined, a single breath, a single tremor. And then Marina suddenly perceived a scent, like orange blossom or lemon, or the leaves of an orange tree. A fragrance that filled the room. She smelled her hands. Nothing. Maybe? She took a deep breath. It was his scent, the scent she loved so much. Clean, fresh, lavender. Scents linger, like memories. They stay forever. When he used to leave, Marina would search for his scent in the bed, and she would fall asleep again, thinking he was still beside her. When she told him this, he would laugh. How she loved to see him laugh. He looked even younger then, with that blonde lock of hair that would fall over his forehead when he wasn't paying attention. With that ironic little smirk, his finely shaped lips would form. He was such a child when he laughed. How she had loved him. How she loved him. So much that she remained there, outside of time, indifferent to everything else, far from everyone, trapped in memory, moment by moment, word by word, as if the years had never passed, as if it had been just yesterday. And Marina felt an overwhelming need to see, to know. She stood up and went to look for the small chest where she kept letters, photographs, a handkerchief, dried flowers, and all those little things people tend to save there. He was surrounded by the professors on the day of his lawyer's reception. Upon seeing him, Marina felt a tingling rise through her veins and a knot that choked her. An electric discharge shook the night, and the lights went out. Marina remained motionless, the chest open, waiting for them to return. Slowly, tears began to roll down her cheeks. After so long without being able to cry, when she thought she had exhausted them all, they now came like a warm rain to soothe her eyes, burning from lack of sleep. The weak glow of an oil lamp, which she always kept in her room, cast a faint light into the living room. She kept that lamp constantly lit because she wanted it to be a testament to her undying love. When the lights came back on, she looked at the photograph, damp with tears. He wore a dark suit on the night of the reception. He looked very serious. Nerves, no doubt. He was very nervous, too nervous, more than his friends thought. His hands were always cold and damp. She would take them in hers until she managed to ease their stiffness and warm them. His hands, long and slender. In that other photograph, they were with friends after dinner. They had danced. He danced very well. She remembered that step of his, as if he slightly dragged his foot when turning. He was quite tall. She barely reached his shoulder where she would always rest her head. They always danced closely embraced, as if they were one body. And she relived a deep shudder, a vibration through her entire being at just the memory. A little dizzy from the cocktails, they had gone for a walk by the reservoir. She took off her shoes and ran barefoot along the embankment. Marina heard soft footsteps, as if someone had entered the room. That sound of old wood when someone walks. It's just the furniture creaking and groaning from the humidity. The dressers, the tables, the chairs. Everything creaks. Everything laments. She had heard them so many times at night. All noises amplify. The ticking of the clock, barely audible during the day, in the silence of the night sounds like an imposing pendulum. He had stayed behind, smoking, leaning against the railing of the embankment, watching her run without saying a word. He looked so pale under the full moon's light, so terribly, terribly pale and beautiful, just as he was now, watching her motionless and serene, standing there near the piano. Marina slowly rose, her heart pounding wildly, and placed the chest on a table beside her. She stood there, not knowing what to do or think, paralyzed as if she had suddenly fallen into a void. It must have been the shock, the emotion of seeing him again when she had lost all hope, and how to understand it, how to explain it, not knowing if it was his body, that body she knew so well, or if it was just smoke, something that would dissolve in her hands. She had seen the coffin lowering into the grave. Even then she had wondered 1,000 times if it was really him, his body, inside that metal box she could never bring herself to open, because it was beyond her strength, and because it was impossible that he was inside, stiff, dead. Someone had insisted she should see him, that it was for the best. Others said she wouldn't be able to bear looking at his ruined face. Then they started shoveling earth over him. The gravediggers' spades filled the grave, that misty, cold November afternoon. No, she couldn't move. It was as if she had grown roots and couldn't break those few steps separating them to run to him, to throw her arms around his neck as before whenever she saw him arrive. She didn't dare touch him, and yet it was what she wanted most, what she had waited for so long. She had never been able to resist him, overwhelmed by an irrepressible vehemence, a passion that threw her into his arms. She wanted to embrace him, kiss him, trace his body, recognizing every part of him. But the smoke, the dust, the bare bones. She couldn't stop thinking about those things, couldn't push them from her mind. No, she couldn't. But he must not look at her like that, not like that, not like that for God's sake. "Don't look at me like that," Marina cried out and began to sob silently, covering her face. When they argued, she always cried and said so many things, lamenting his cruelty. He would remain serious and silent, pensive, looking at her with that gaze of his, full of sadness, like a silent reproach, a way of telling her not to torment him with foolishness. With that same gaze now, the howls of dogs filled the night. Marina stopped crying and lifted her head. "Don't be startled. It's just the dogs howling in the night, the wind rattling the doors. There's no one else in this house, only you and me, separated by just a few steps, consumed by a longing that has lasted years. The absence has been so long. Let me tell you about those endless nights when I called for you until I lost my voice, until only a harsh, dry sound came from my hoarse throat, and how, enraged at never seeing you again, I threw myself furiously against the walls and the furniture until I collapsed, faint and lifeless, on the bed. That hard bed you never liked, that creaked so much. Do you remember? Wait, don't move. Wait a little longer. I no longer know what I'm saying. So many scattered thoughts, I don't know what death is. I've never understood it. But you are not dead. And even if you were, my love is not dead, nor is yours. And we are alone. Alone. Together. With the same desperate longing. The clock has stopped. Do you hear it? There's no more time. We can love each other now, without clocks threatening us with their hammering hours, without having to separate our bodies ever again. How painful it was when I pulled away from you, hurried you to dress and leave before dawn so no one would see you leaving my house. How painful it was to watch you go every day when the door closed behind you and I ran to the window to watch you disappear into the shadows of the street. Then I would lie on the bed, eyes wide open, reliving every moment. I waited for you for so long. I no longer know how many years. Long nights pressed against the window pane, watching shadows pass in the street, running after someone who could be you, only to see their face and realize it was a stranger. One day, I lost hope that you would ever return, and I have lived all these long, endless years only with your memory. I have remembered you always, every hour, every moment, especially at night when it rains, and one feels so alone and inconsolable, listening to the rain fall endlessly. Wait, my love. Wait just a moment longer. I must tell you, I am not the same as before. You know, one stops eating, stops sleeping, and grows weak. But say nothing. Don't be sad. I can still give you the same love, the same pleasure. Come now, my love. Come. Hold me tight.